Hi, everyone. Marc Tassin here. Thanks for joining us again on Out of Character. This is episode 7, and it's a show where your favorite creators drop out of character for an hour to talk with game designer and host Marc Tassin, that's me, about their art, their process, and the nerdy stuff that inspires them. From the secrets behind their craft to the ins and outs of the business to the games, shows, and books that they can't get enough of, it's a unique and candid look at the people who create the stuff you and I love. Comments are going to be open throughout the show, so feel free to drop in your thoughts or questions or anything else that you want to add, and we'll try to pull some of that in during the show. So without further ado, I'm very excited to introduce Out of Character's guest this week, Seth Skorkowsky. Hi, Seth. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, so thanks for being on. I guess the first thing I'd like to ask, and this is the thing I always hit folks with right off the bat, is tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay. I'm a fantasy and horror author. So I've got my novels and my short stories. And then one day I decided it'd be a cool way to promote it is I could talk about tabletop role playing games on YouTube. And so I kind of became a much bigger YouTuber than I am an author. So I've got a very active YouTube channel where I talk about different games, philosophies of gaming, or just sometimes really, really stupid videos that are just jokes. So that's pretty much what I do. So now I've written with a few games now and all sorts of stuff, but yeah, pretty much author, YouTuber are the two main titles.
Well, and you're pretty good at the YouTuber thing, at least according to the Emmy Awards. Am I right?
Yes, that was an absolute surprise when I won. Yeah, I was like, yeah, I was kind of like the guy from Galaxy Quest. Like I was just jazzed about being on the show, and then when I won, I walked up there, had no idea what I was going to say. It was the clumsiest acceptance speech because it was like, I don't believe this just happened. My pessimism got me.
Oh, that's pretty great. Well, I'm sure that at least it was very cool. I mean, even if it hadn't worked out that way, just being nominated, but actually getting selected for that is just fantastic. Now, your show, like you said, you do a lot of different stuff. I've noticed that you do some. We will get to your books, by the way. I want to talk about those too. But since we're talking about the YouTube show, you do some things like actual play, right? Now, is that how big of a part of your show is that, or is that just something you've done a few times?
Well, so I don't run actual plays. Like I've never GM'd one, but I've joined plenty as a player. So I've done How We Roll podcast, Chambers of Role Play, Into the Darkness. I recently did one, and they let me post it on my channel, which was like, wow, thanks guys. With Glass Cannon Network. So we did a Call of Cthulhu, and I'm joining them on one for Traveler this next month, doing like a 10 to 12 episode Traveler campaign, which I'm looking forward to. So that'll be so I'm actually going to join their regular cast for at least one campaign. So but as far as running them, no, but playing them, oh yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's the Glass Cannon one I actually saw on your channel at one point because I was looking through them. And I guess what I'm wondering is how different is it to be in a live play like that versus just hanging around the table with your friends? Is it that different, or is it kind of the same experience?
It's the same, but totally different. It's like, how's that for an answer? One of the things, I will get a lot of requests for, why don't you do your games? And I was like, my games that I play, apparently like we're just a normal gaming group. We're a bunch of old friends. Some of them I've been playing with for 20 something years since we were, in college together. And for those, we would never record them because that's kind of like our time to be a bunch of dorks pretending we're 20 years old again. And
Right.
We don't have any care or obligation to anything or anyone outside the room or outside of anyone at the table.
Mm-hmm.
When you're doing a stream, outside of the technical hurdles, because I mean, think about it, you got 5-6 people and then all the technical stuff on top of that. Right. In the back of your mind, there's always the audience, which, so you have to, so you people intentionally or not will play to the audience, and or you will consider the things you say because what you're saying is going out there. The public, we're in an age where a 10-year-old tweet can cost you your career. I mean,
Right.
Guardians of the Galaxy just showed us that, or just, but so those are things that you always consider, so stuff like dead air, if I'm sitting around with my guys, I'm like, okay, here's the problem. They'll sit there silent for 45 seconds. And if I'm like, so, what are we doing? But if you're streaming, you don't, like everybody has to like keep talking and stuff. So we're still playing, we're still having fun, we're still doing all that stuff. But there is the idea of there is an audience, and that's in the back of your head the whole time. And you never
Yeah.
get fully comfortable like you do if you're sitting around with your buddies. And that's it. So that's one of the biggest differences that I think people that have never done it don't understand is, yes, it's real, but at the same time, it's not totally real.
Yeah, and it would be, I mean, in some ways that it's kind of impossible because there's a certain level of curation that you're doing to your own role play, it sounds like, as you're going through, rather than just doing the thing you would do if you're with your friends. You stop for a second and think, is this what I want to do in public before the whole world, and go
Yeah.
forward?
Because I always describe, like, man, when our games go, it sounds like Cards Against Humanity. We are the most vulgar, horrible people, but we're also 20-year friends. So that's how we talk. It was a film. It was actually probably the first fake documentary film made, and I think it was called David Holzman's Diary. So I was a film major, so I know like lots of weird, obscure film stuff.
Uh-huh.
And it was the plot was in the 60s about a guy who decides to film his whole life. And actually what you end up watching is this guy's life collapsing because he's filming it. And there's a scene. I remember watching this when I was like 2021, and with a streaming phenomenon brought it back, and it always really weighs on me. Is he's talking to his friend, and his friend is kind of standing against a wall, and he's asking him, David, can you turn off the camera and do all that? And he wrote, none of this is real. Like, this isn't real at all, which I think that was a kind of a clue to the audience that it wasn't even a real, it was
Right.
scripted. But he's like, I'm thinking right now where I should put my hands, because it's got a kind of a hand behind his back. So, that because that camera's there, I'm considering where I should hold my hands right now. And
Right.
so it's not, none of this is real, because people know when they're being filmed, they immediately act different. And once people start talking about like, oh, streaming games, it's totally real. I always remember that little scene from a 1960s independent fake documentary where this one guy is actually laying out all the reasons why, once a camera's on you, you're not 100% real anymore. There is a performance factor to it. And even when you're doing YouTube, just the stuff that I do, it actually took me quite a while to find my real voice, because once the camera's on you, you naturally start performing, and it actually takes quite a while to learn how to just be yourself, or at least perform in the way that is the most like you, the most like yourself you could be. So
Okay,
that's
now I'm completely thinking about how I'm performing. So
welcome to the existential thing.
right, exactly. Now I'm in the loop. Oh my God. No, I think the thing that sounds interesting to me though is that what I'm hearing you say is that although, I know some people are like, it's not real, it's scripted. I know I've talked to enough people. I'm like, no, people are making their own decisions. They're improving along the way. But I think what people maybe are picking up on is some of that it's impossible not to, it's very hard to forget that you've got a camera there, right? At the end
No,
of the
yeah.
day. It's like an experience.
If I'm sitting around with my buddies, there is nothing stopping me from just picking my nose. Like that's, but the camera obviously like, no, I won't.
Well, I'm glad you get a camera on you, so that's good.
You're welcome. But so when a lot of people look at a lot of the stream shows, like, Critical Role and all this, it's fake. It's like, it's not fake in the way you're thinking. It's fake, but in the sense that they're performers who know there is a camera on them, fake, versus what they're doing is totally real. And I believe they're having fun. And I believe they are gaming completely legit, but there's this added aspect to it that causes it to not be perfectly real.
Right.
But that's also why the successful ones are successful. A lot of stream games out there, it's like, so is that what it's like? It's like, Man, if I was just running it with my buddies, at one point I'd be like, guys, settle the hell down. But some things make better television.
Right,
So
exactly. The story's off the rails, and everyone is So first, I want to take a second to say that we have someone actually watching us from a commuter train in central Japan right now, which is amazing to me. That's a first for me. So very cool. So, hi, Tristan. Hope that you're having a good commute this morning. I hear that riding the commuter trains is a wonderful experience in Japan. So hopefully that's going great. I also want to note that Orcus Dorcas tells me that you love the Roll20 dice roller. I don't know. Is that
it's not that it's not my feelings towards it. It's that the Roll20 dice roller is sentient and hates me personally.
I hear you.
So it I have played games where it's like, what percentage dice? You have to roll low. And it's like, yeah, I've played entire games where I've never rolled below an 85 or I've just failed everything. It's like this dice roller knows. It's like Skynet. It's sentient and it wants me dead. It wants me dead because I'm onto it.
Good to know. It's very good to know, and I will curse it less when I'm playing then to avoid angering it. That's good. That's useful information. Another thing that someone, his name Billy Berserker, is saying, he's going, that table talk's a little different because you have to get used to texting it when you're online and when you're going live.
Oh yeah, especially like with doing online games, which I've never enjoyed. But then COVID happened, and we all had to learn how to do it because
Right?
we
Yeah.
played for many years all in the same room, and all of a sudden we were trying to figure out the technical aspects. All of a sudden, one of the biggest things I don't like about online gaming, there's like a whole list, but like when it comes to one of the biggest is if we're sitting around a table. And like this is my game room, so sometimes I gesture because from my point of view, this is literally exactly where I sit when
Yeah.
I game. Like there's the rest of a table in front of me. Um, if I'm talking to one player and we're like kind of going back and forth, two players over there can kind of whisper like, okay, this is what we're gonna do that, that, or like somebody can look at their sheet, be like, hey, what's this skill doing? And like somebody can kind of so it's like there's like side conversations that can happen. But when you're online and we're all in the same audio channel, you kind of have to wait for the next person to talk. So we felt so weirdly limited because we couldn't just have all these simultaneous side conversations that like I might be hearing a little bit of it while I'm talking to so and so. So even if they're
Yeah.
talking on a text channel, it's not any remotely near the same. And we found like among weird stuff that we discovered, if we're playing in person, we would go 8 hours, no problem. Like that's
Mhm.
just what we did. We're conditioned for it. But when we jumped online, it dropped to 4, and we're all like, okay, I'm done. Like
Yeah.
I can't keep going. And it's because a lot of those little things like that really changed every aspect to it. So
Yeah.
we were very happy once we had like, it's like okay, we're all vaxxed, we're all good. Let's get back into this room, which my game room would slowly become the studio/junk room. So also I was like, oh my god, I've got to clean.
Right? Oh my god, you don't even want to see my game room right now. It's unusable because we're still gaming online. And I will say this, one of the best online gaming experiences we had though is we played the new Alien role-playing game, and it was perfect because you could mute people, you could drop them off the screen and leave everyone else going, dude, where did Steve go? He was like here a second ago. And I'm on the side typing things to him saying, you don't even want to know what's happening to you right now. And it was like this beautiful thing because you had this effect of people talking to each other on little hand screens and stuff throughout. So it was
There are
one
some,
time I have to say it nailed it. It was great.
a lot of this is one of the things which a lot of like the higher end recorded stream shows could do is that I can't, but as just a guy, is like if I could have a producer who
Hmm.
could do all that stuff for me. That way I don't have to like, okay, let me try to do the technical stuff while talking to somebody, trying to remember, what's behind the door with the monster and all that. If I could just literally have like a tech that's, you don't play, you just start tech. Can you play the sound effects at the right time? Oh, that would be so great.
You know what?
Um,
If there are people out there listening, here's your business idea. There's already plenty of things where you can rent a dungeon master, things like that. set
RPG
up a
tech.
thing where you RPG tech, right? Full time. You just show up for the game. You got a whole list of sound effects and cool music. It'd be fantastic.
Okay, that
Yeah.
actually sounds really badass.
Right? Doesn't it?
Damn.
Excellent. All right.
They have to have like
Someone
an NDA to play with us. Like, man, would you believe the stuff these people say? But
that would have to be part of it. It's kind of like seeing a doctor or a lawyer. You know, your text just doesn't talk about what happens at the game table.
but Alien is one of those games that actually I just jumped on their Kickstarter for Blade Runner. At first, I was like, I'm not really
Yeah.
sure, and I told my wife about it. She's like, "You're not joining this?" And like, okay, well, I am now. So, but the Alien role playing game, they did a really cool, like they pretty much toured the circuit at conventions for like a year before their starter set came out. And the best testimonial I ever heard about it was some guys that I met at a con right before con stopped. And he was like, I've played a lot of sci-fi games for 30 years. Never once in my life have I been afraid of running out of air. And
Right?
he was like, I was absolutely horrified that my character would run out of air and die gasping. And I'm like, wow, I have never been afraid of running out of air either. He's like, yeah, that's something I'm going to tell you about it, and you should play it for that alone. It's like everything else about it's great, but they actually made me afraid of running out of air, and that was actually what encouraged me to do it. All the other stuff is cool, but the fact that we actually had fear from something that every game tries to make you afraid of and has never worked, and then we played it and we're like, oh my god, this is exactly like the movie.
It was. I have to say, I mean, that's what we felt like too. And so, folks, because I love the stuff that Free League does, I'm going to throw their Blade Runner Kickstarter link up here. It's probably easier to search for it than to type in what I just showed you, but all the same, there's a visual aid for you. But yeah, I mean,
what are you,
really
a replicant? How do you even? Come on, you.
I'm my own magic tech. So let's talk for a minute, though. I'm having way too much fun talking about this, so we don't get totally carried away. I want to talk a little bit about your books and about your writing, because that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about on the show. You have done quite a bit. You've done a couple of series. You've done tons of short stories. You've done at least one standalone book. One of the ones that just the really absolutely gorgeous cover is Ashes of Onyx, right? Just grabbed my eye. I mean, can you tell me a little bit about Ashes of Onyx? Like, where did this come from? How did you end up writing this one?
Okay. So there are books that you write for different reasons. So my debut novel, Dameron, I wrote with the underlying intention of I'm finally going to write a book that an editor will buy. So there was a lot of I need to write a book that's super sellable, and I wrote it with that in mind. What is good in a market,
And that's
and
this
then
one,
that
the Al Duke and Dameron
yeah,
book, right?
and then that led to 4 standalone novels. It's one of the big things I'm also really big on is I hate reading a book that just kind of stops and then I got to wait a year for the next part. So they're all
Right.
standalones, and each of them follows a different theme, and most of them follow different protagonists. Like we just change. This book's from so and so's point of view of a future story. It happens after the first one. Ashes came about for this is totally for me. So it is kind of a love letter to a lot of stuff that really did inspire me, such as there's a lot of the Carcosa King in Yellow mythology, which is why there are the several moons behind her in the ruins. As we talk about Carcosa, it is fantasy, but it's also got a lot of portal and different worlds in there. It's because Clive Barker's Magica was probably one of the most influential books on me when I was young. So it's very dark, very dark, but so it pulls in just a lot of things that inspired me and did that. It's like, I'm going to write this for me. I think I can get away with it because I'm not an unknown anymore.
Right.
So that is my love letter to a lot of different things. I think it's technically what you would call a new weird because it does not fit into any genre. And that was my first problem trying to sell it is,
Well, yeah, right.
I'd have editors like, we don't know what subgenre to put this in. It's like, speculative fiction fantasy, like, yeah, except then you break down the tree to the 900 different ones, and it doesn't fit into any single one of them. It starts off
Mhm.
urban fantasy, and then it's not at all. Like, ooh, new weird. Like, yeah, it's not big enough that that's a genre tree yet.
Yeah.
So uh, that one I love,
Let me
but
ask you this though, would if, knowing that, would you have done it any different if you had, like, purposely written it different to fit into a genre, or would you have gone
no.
in the direction you did?
No. Th While there's a lot of stuff on once a book comes out, you always have a growing, eternally growing list of, if I could go back and change that,
Yeah.
I would. That will never be one for it.
Yeah.
Mostly because, like I said, this book was mine.
Mhm.
All the others, like, oh my god, I wish I had done this differently. Things will pop up in reviews, and you're like, yeah, I agree with you. But
You're not wrong.
Um, like, I learned my lesson. Please read my later stuff. I figured it out after that, but
Yeah.
not with that one. That one's like, it goes full bore into addiction. So we've got a hero who actually has a drug addiction when you start off,
Mhm.
and a lot of that was from Neuromancer by William Gibson, which starts
Yeah.
off with, we have a horribly drug addicted hero
Mhm.
in the opening thing, and then when
Right.
I was working with my editor on that one, T Tate, she basically took the first two paragraphs, and like at the last line in the second paragraph, she just circled it and was like, which was Kate needed a fix. And she's like, that's your opening line of the book. Delete absolutely everything before that. And I'm like, my God, you're right.
Right?
just
That
exit out.
yeah, that definitely
So,
works.
it opens with Kate needed a fix, because that's one of the big things. And then, of course, my parents read it and they're like, yeah, I really don't know how to feel about these aspects of your character. And it's like, she's she's broken. We start her at the rock bottomest I could get her, and that
Yeah.
was just part of her character. It's a redemption story, but you can't be redeemed unless you're in the gutter.
You gotta start somewhere bad in order for the redemption to work at all. Well,
and,
I
and and
the
for it to be believable, it
yeah.
isn't smooth. It's like there's relapses and all the crap that goes along with redemption. So yeah, I wouldn't change that. There are other little things I would change, but that, nah, not at all. I would keep it still in that non-genre area.
One of the reasons I brought that up is that what I've been hearing from folks, and every person who's been on has stated that the things that they wrote or drew or created because they loved it, because it meant something to them personally, those are the things that were really meaningful to them. And they never felt like, man, I sure wish I would have tried to fit it into some mold, or I wish it's like they just went for it. They just did the thing they love because as most folks know, it's not like there's tons of money in the arts. We get that. And most folks are forced to, work another job. Even some of the people who are like, yeah, this person's one of my favorite comic book artists. It's like, they're like a teacher, right? They like have to have their professor so that they can actually get health care and stuff.
Yeah,
But I think one of the things throughout is people saying, yeah, you should pursue the things that you care about, that you love and
which
have
because
passion.
yeah, like begin with like my Volga stuff. Like, it's like this was a story that's been in my head for like years before I finally did it, and it
Yeah.
was actually the book I was going to write after my first book sold, which ended up being the book in a drawer. And
Mhm.
uh, I went to this writing workshop at a convention called FinCon, and basically you spend 3 days locked in a room with an editor and 19 other people,
Hmm.
and it was Lou Anders. He had just won the Hugo
Oh, yeah.
like
It was
the
great.
month before. So I spent 3 days locked in a room with Lou, and we had all spent weeks reading each other's stuff. So whenever he was talking to one person, we all knew exactly what he was talking about because we had all read and reviewed each other's sample stuff. So it was all great information. And pretty much when he read mine, he was like, "Okay, this book taught you how to write. It's unsellable crap. So but you know what to do for the next one." And I know that sounds like it was harsh, and I left that feeling so released. Like, he told me what I deep down knew. And so
Mhm.
when I got out of that weekend, I would say, "So what did he say?" He's like, "He said it's crap." Like, he said it much nicer than that, but I knew
Right.
what he meant, and he was right. And my wife thought I'd be devastated. I was like, no. And I started Dameron the next week. And the big thing that Lou had focused on was the first 10 pages.
Mhm.
And that was what I did in the first 10. Like everything you said, I took to heart. So yes, it was a passion project to what I wanted, but always in the back of my head was I'm going for something that is sellable, because at the time you're an unpublished author, and he brought up Stephen King can get away with taking 150 pages before he bothers to get to whatever the hell the point is, because he's Stephen King.
Right. And people will keep reading because it's
Yeah,
Stephen King, right? They're
yeah,
not going to give up on
but Billy needs to hook you in the first paragraph, otherwise they're going to stop. So I'm Billy.
Right.
So, and that's one of the big differences is everything you write should be because it's what you want. But there's also a lot of stuff you want to write. So when you're kind of sitting there looking at the buffet of all the stuff you want to write, say, which ones of these will other people want to read? Because there's the weird stuff that is totally for me, and there's the stuff that I think other people would really, really dig this. I think most people
Mhm.
would dig this. And that's where that fell in, is I want to do this and I think everybody else would like it. The other one was
I
like, I want to do this and I think the right people like it.
Right, exactly. The ones who will pay you money, right, are the right people in that case. I guess so. The thing that I'm sort of wondering is that I've seen writers and folks who want to be writers struggling to make it in the business and focusing all their effort on writing that story that someone's going to pay them for, that's going to get published in something, sometimes something obscure, and it's not what they really want to write. Right, they're just doing it because they've been told that, yeah, that's the secret. The secret is just to keep going, and they're like going, yeah, and someday when I finish writing all these things I don't care about, then I'll write the thing that I care about, because then people will know who I am. And I think that's kind of a dangerous trap that some writers get into.
No, I absolutely agree with that. If you if you approach it as an absolute job of it's I got to do this to get to the next level, to get to the next level, sort of
Hmm.
thing like that, it really does come out, versus if it is something that you are passionate about. Um, and so if you are if you're not really invested in the story, it's really difficult to write it where a reader will be invested in the story. I mean, you can feel that, as this sort of thing. If you're reading a story, you can tell if an author really wasn't into it and they were just kind of paying
Hmm.
a lip service. So yes, definitely write what you are passionate about,
Yeah.
but you should also keep in mind, uh, sellability.
Right. Well, that's just it too. Is that at the same time, some folks are like, I'm just going to write this, and then I'm going to be mad that it won't sell. It's like, well, it's fine if you write it, but if it doesn't sell, that's not necessarily, the fault of the people who you're trying to sell it to. I mean, it's a business, right? At the end of the day, if you're really getting published, there are business decisions to be made as well.
Absolutely, and the a lot of the old rules of the publishing business are so backwards compared to how they were 15 years ago and how they
Yeah.
were 30 years ago, and all that. So a lot of people are like, well, so and so did that. It's like, yeah, he did that in 1980. You realize, like, none of those
Right.
rules exist anymore. And publishing is so glacially slow. I remember when I
Hmm.
was trying to pitch my first novel, the one that's in the drawer right now, in about 2008. Out of all the agents I queried, I think there were two that actually took them as emails. Before that, and every short story sale I'd done before that, I had to get my first 10 pages and print it out, fold it up with a self-addressed stamped envelope so I could mail
Hmm.
myself my own rejection letter, and then I would
Exactly.
send that off. And then a few weeks later, I would get an envelope that in my own handwriting addressed to me, and I'd look at their return address, like, okay, yeah, it's like the weirdest thing. This is like 2008, and they still didn't
Yeah.
take emails at most agencies. Like, it's so glacially slow. It's so weird. Which that's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
But on average, they were like 10 years behind the rest of the world, and how it
Hmm.
works. So everything in publishing is so strange. But I feel that you should write what you want, what you what gets you excited. But yeah, definitely keep that in mind. It's like people not understanding you need to learn the technical aspects. It's
Mhm.
with any art, there's a massive amount of technical aspect to it. Because a lot of people are like, oh, just write from the heart. Say yes, write from the heart, but you need to learn how to write first. Uh,
Mhm.
I think in an interview I did last week, I was discussing Michelangelo, massive visionary, mind brilliance that I could never understand, but he also had the technical ability to
Mhm.
remove the marble to show the statue underneath. It's one thing to have the vision, but you need to know all the technical aspects of how to write effectively.
Yeah.
And if you're going to write, there's the work part. So
What do you think's the easiest, or not the easiest? What do you think is the best way to get there with your technical aspect of it? Do you think it's having other people giving you feedback? Do you think it's just writing as much as you can? I mean, what do you think's the best way?
the best way for me was
Mhm.
very early on. I joined a workshop, the OWW Online Writing Workshop,
Yeah.
which how that worked is you basically posted a chapter at a time, but in order to post a chapter, you had to review four other people. And it was learning how to review other writers that I learned how to write, because sometimes you get a crit and they're almost all amateurs. There's some bigger names there. How I got Elizabeth Bear on the cover for my blurb of Damaris, she was on there as one of their
Oh, very cool.
as one of the legit authors, with all of us, idiots in the audience. And people, when they would review you, they'd say, so it's like, you don't understand my genius. It's kind of how you take it. Um,
Right.
and then later on, I'm reviewing somebody else. I'm like, you know, I think what you need to do is this. And the voice is a little passive or whatnot. I never understood passive voice yet. And I suddenly found myself saying the exact same things people had said to me. And that's when I
Mhm.
was able to look back at my stuff and be like, oh, that's what they're talking about. So
Right.
for me, the best lesson that I learned through a lot of the technical aspect was learning how to review others and how to read in a very critical way. Um, and I think those are the type of people that you want reviewing your stuff. Because if you write your story and you give it to your friends and your mom or whoever, and they're
Right.
they're reading it, one, they love you, they know you, they want to support you, and they're going to be like, oh, it's great. So what you need to do is literally send it to somebody that actually knows the technical aspect, because they can not tell you why they can tell you why something is off.
Right.
um, but also they don't have that same level of affection. So I actually have a whole level of friends that our entire friendship was came out of this, because well, I like them and I respect them and they're great. We can be so brutally honest with each other that's the foundation for it. Versus if it's my
Right.
buddy, I'm like, I want to support them. Well, with them, it's like, okay, you're an idiot and you know better than this, and I am ashamed for you. Like, oh God, what did I do? And like, we'll brutalize each other, then we'll laugh and have a beer. But so I think that's actually the best way to learn it, is to join a writing workshop and
Mhm.
and just learn how to get the hard truth, but learn how to review others, because that's how you wire your brain to look for stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm in a writers group, and for me, that's the place I go where they're like going, yeah, this is really not your best work. Let's talk about it, right? Let's help you figure out what's going on here, right? I have to admit though that maybe I just have different friends, but they generally brutalize me just because they enjoy it, and I don't think that that helps either. But
Well, it's one thing to brutalize. It's another to say like, okay, this doesn't work, and you know better. And then
yeah,
say, and this is some suggestions that I have.
right,
So it's one thing for them to like, cut you down, but they have to build you back up. And that's actually one of the key differences, is that they know how to do that. And they can also
yeah,
say why something is wrong. Because I've also had kind of newer authors, when they would kind of jump on there, they would point out things like, there's a problem here. And then look at it and say, okay, there is a problem there, but it's not what you think it is. And I didn't know about it till you mentioned it, but you found something was off.
yeah,
You weren't you didn't have the level yet to identify what it was. But they're like, this two paragraph spread, there's something off. And they'll kind of throw out what they think it is. Like, no, it was this. but I wouldn't have known about it if you hadn't said
Exactly, right, there's still
something's wrong
value
here.
there, right? You're still getting value for it. I mainly meant the guys in my gaming group just will never
Oh
give
yeah,
me
yeah.
a moment's rest anyway, so, I mean, that's a kind of a given. Well, one thing I do wanna mention while we're talking is you're talking about workshops and things, and what a lot of folks we are on Gen Con TV, and what a lot of folks don't know is that Gen Con has secretly had a writer symposium for, I think, going on more than 30 years right now. And right now they're restarting in person. It would have been down for a couple of years due to COVID, but I think they have over 120 different events and workshops and authors, and I mean it's usually fantastic programs. So I'm really excited to see what they're doing this year, but it's a great way to spend, you've got a couple of hours in between your games and you want to go down, whether you're a game master or whoever. It's a great place to go and spend a couple hours just learning more about the craft from
No,
people who are doing it.
no, the Gen Con Writer Symposium is wonderful. So I'm looking forward to seeing who all they've got this year. I haven't checked it out because usually they'll get some really good names that'll show up. I mean, or they'll get smaller names like me, who was a guest of theirs in 2019. But I also like the fact they shuffle it, because I've also done a lot of conventions where it's like the same 8 people every year. The Writer Symposium pretty much had it as a hard rule of we will shuffle who we have, that way we don't end up with that stagnation. And I was talking with James Lauder, who's now with Chaosium. He made his name real big with TSR when he did the TSR fiction, and he was like, that was where they sold me, because he absolutely loves the Writer Symposium, and he's like, that's the best thing I ever heard. Basically, when he was turned down for the second year, they explained why. He's like, I will follow you guys till death now. Because
So I used to, what folks may not know is back in the day, I ran the Writer Symposium for about 7 or 8 years, a few years back. And I may have been the person who turned it down, but I did explain that, we wanted to have a mix because you need to hear different voices. And the thing is that every single one of them doesn't have to be a New York Times bestseller. Right. I mean, what you need is different people writing in different ways, talking to you in a way that may or may not connect with you. But that's why you have a diversity of voices talking to folks about how they write, what inspires them. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do with this show. In fact, this is kind of an extension of what I used to do, is that it's really important to me to give people, someone that they can talk to and go, God, that's actually more like what I'm trying to do. Right. And that's more like how I write. And I think that that's the cool thing about engaging a lot of different people for a program like that. So, well, I've talked up the Writer Symposium enough here.
You don't have to sell me on it. I'm a massive fan. So.
Well, I do enjoy telling people about it, because people are like, oh, like when I was running it, they're like, what Writer Symposium? I go, well, we have 250 panels. And they're like, that's huge. I'm like, yeah, you should probably come. They had no idea it was there. It was like the best secret in the world. So,
oh well, I mean, because I think Pat Rothfuss has done it. Scott Lynch had to leave last second before the year I went, which broke my heart. But also, I don't fanboy, except for the 4 people on Earth that I fanboy for. So that was kind of a relief of oh, good, I'm not going to completely embarrass myself.
Right. I mean, that is kind of tough. I think the thing is that when you're actually running it, you're so stressed out that all the fanish stuff goes away, because all you care about is whether the people show up for their panels or not at that point.
well, actually, it's true. At cons where I've been a guest, you kind of sit around the green room with everybody. It's you're just a bunch of people. They cover the back of your head. The part of you that would be squealing is like, no, not today.
Too tired.
But no, the first time I ever fanboyed in my life, actually the only time I have ever just gone off the rails, crazy fanboy, was at that Gen Con. And it was when I met Mike Pondsmith. And I was with our mutual friend Melanie. She was walking around with me, and I dropped by the Artel Story table, and I met Mike Pondsmith. It's the people I were working with. They knew who I was. I'm like, Mike, hey, this is Seth Skorkowsky, talks about your stuff. And I have met all sorts of heroes. I've met them all, big and small. And for some reason, when he's all like, hey, with the deepest, most magical voice ever, this 13-year-old idiot just came barbling out of my mouth. and Melanie is looking at me like, what the hell? And I like to imagine my eyes looking at her with like, shut me up or kill me right now
Uh-huh.
because I can't stop.
It's so funny because I don't think people realize that everyone does that in some way. There's always someone that you talk to, and people are like, "Oh, I'm so embarrassed. I went and got to meet, Jim Butcher or whoever is their fan, Brandon Sanderson, or we had Charlaine Harris there once, right?" And they're like, "I sound like a moron." I'm like, "Yeah, but there's somebody that they meet that they do the same thing. We all do that. There's somebody where our brain just shuts off when we meet them and we don't know where to go."
And like that's never happened before. I was completely unprepared for that. Was it
Right.
Charlene Harris? When I did meet her at a con, uh, I'm not much into her books. I absolutely love her.
Mhm.
Mind like a steel trap. She could remember absolutely every single person that was during the con, and a fact about them would say, she's met like 2,000 people
Right.
that day, and she could name all these details about people. It was like, my God, how smart are you? It's like, people tell me their name, I forget it in 45 seconds. And so absolutely delightful woman. But clearly the smartest person in the room. But she's
Yeah.
also like this little 5 foot tall little grandma with like big curly hair. It's the last person you space like, yeah, she's the smartest person in here, and she's
Right.
funny. So I
Well, she
left just a
and
massive fan of her.
yeah. Well, and I think that, that's kind of interesting too, because one thing that I think is true is that anyone who's been really successful in their craft, you can learn from them, even if they're not your style, even if it's not what you would normally pick up and read. There's something there that is worth listening to and understanding what they've got to offer. And she had a lot of just amazing stuff to say when she was there as a guest. And I will admit, I ate up her books when I read them. I was just like, these are fantastic. I don't usually read stuff like that. That's not really my usual thing, but I'm just like going, oh my God. My wife had them laying around. I picked one up and started reading. I'm like, I'm going to read all these if that's cool with you. But the reality, though, is that there are other popular series that I never quite could get into. And yet I still looked at them and I said, what is it? And like, for example, one person, I never loved their craft, but I absolutely loved that they could spin a story that people couldn't get enough of. That spinning of the story, they just kept going. And it's like, not my style, but I can see what it was. And if I can learn from that, it's really valuable.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
No, it's very cool. So, hey, there is a question that I would have been sort of ignoring, a question about the difference between writing stories for a novel or even for a short story, and when you're writing for gaming, right? There's this sort of a different mindset. Is there something different? How do you approach it? What are some of the differences for you, if any?
Okay. It's absolutely different. Other than the fact I use English, that's where the similarities usually end.
Yeah.
So when you're writing for your game, whether it's like you're going to publish a module or you're writing for your buddies,
Hmm.
um, you have absolute control up until the moment the game starts, and then after that, you're like that old circus actor. You've got plates on a stick, and you just got to run around
Right.
spinning them, and you're trying to keep the whole thing together. If I'm writing a short story, writing a novel or whatever, I can go back, I can change stuff. My character will be motivated to engage in whatever it is because I wrote them that way. They will have the
Right.
correct idea to solve the problem they're in at the right time because I wrote them that way.
Yeah.
If I completely failed to foreshadow something, I can go back and I can add foreshadowing. But with the game, basically the GM I've got the backstory and I've got the situation. And after that, it's just going to be me running around like a mad person trying to keep this whole damn thing together. Because once you add the chaos factor of 4 or 7, however many players you have, and dice, which are spiteful little bastards, um, you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think when people try to compare them, they're kind of forgetting like there is a moment, and that's when that game starts. You have no control anymore. Well, when you're an author, you have absolute control uh, the whole way through. Even after it's over, you can go back and change the intro to make it better. Um, and that's one of the big things. So yes, there should be a story, and there should be motivation for the bad guy, and lots of stuff like that. But That's all the
But
stuff before the adventure starts.
you've written for like you wrote for Traveler, right?
Mhm.
And so I think is that the right cover that I've grabbed there to show off?
Yeah, so that one is so I share the credit with that one. There's a gentleman named J. Andrew Keith who back in the
Yeah,
'80s wrote one adventure. I did the update to that, but it's still Keith's adventure.
that one?
And yeah, and then I wrote a
I got
prequel
that.
for it. So like so
Okay.
what it's two adventures. I wrote one, but he did Murder on Arcturus Station. Brilliant guy. Passed away some years ago, but when I started going through a lot of his old catalogs, like my God, that was one of those minds that popped up in the industry. Thankfully, very early on, but probably not going to replace somebody as prolific as he was. Because
Yeah.
I do a lot of investigative mystery adventures. Those are actually like my jam.
Mhm.
Uh, and then so I'm like reading Traveler, which is like sci-fi adventure, and I see their version of a mystery. It's like, yeah, this ain't going to teach me nothing I ain't never seen before, and I was wrong.
Mm.
So I actually kind of bullied Mongoose, who's doing the newest edition, to like, you need to redo this one for the new edition. This cannot be. You cannot lose this to the history of the systems, because it always breaks my heart with games. You know, they change editions, also all these great adventures just kind of go away.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like,
But I
this
mean,
needs to come back.
when you're writing, but I guess this is kind of where what I'm wondering about is, and I've done a fair amount of this myself. So, you know, there's there's a way to put a story down on a page to hand to a different game master that is a different type of storytelling where you, like you said, you have to recognize that once they start, it's going to be chaos in some cases. Or it might go according to the story if they really push it, or if you've written
Maybe.
something really genius. But the reality is that it's a slightly different thing where you have to give certain tools to the game master as opposed to just spelling out a story for them to read to folks, right?
Yeah, and actually that is a big one too. Is I think that a lot of adventures and stuff you read, it's like they were trying to write a story. Say this isn't a story for the GM. It's a story the GM has to be able to tell to the players. Everything in a pre-written adventure really should be aimed at making this easy to run for the
Mm,
game masters. I'm handing you a toolbox, and
yeah.
these are instructions on how to do it. So, like, you know, on the cover is the birdhouse, and you know we're going to open it up. I'm going to tell you how to make a birdhouse.
That's a great
Uh,
way to think about it, right?
you know, or I think the best one I ever did is it's a recipe.
Hmm.
So it's like when you open up a recipe. I just did the Julia Childs show, so I've got a lot of cooking analogies in my head. Uh,
Okay.
but it should tell you up front, this is what we're cooking. This is how many people it serves. This is about how long it takes. And you know, now we will talk about how much flour you need.
Yeah.
And you know, with an adventure, you know, tell me what's going on, who the bad guy is, what it is we're trying to do, how many players I need, and all that, like in the first paragraph. And then it's like, if you're still with me, now let's talk about how to do this. Versus I've read ones where like they kind of keep the bad guy's identity secret to halfway through the adventure, so the GM can have like that, oh, that's who it is. Like, no, don't do that, because the GM needs to know that. It
Yeah.
needs to be an easy to find spot.
Right.
Um, if you want to write a short story where you can have a reveal, write a short story. But if you're
Yeah.
wanting to write an adventure, you're writing a recipe.
Yeah, it's interesting because using that analogy, I mean, you start thinking about things like, a story or a novel is maybe more like describing the meal or perhaps even serving it to someone versus giving them all the ingredients and showing them how to make it themselves and serve it at their own party, right? Which is kind of what the GM is doing.
Oh yeah, and also like any good chef, you know, they'll look at stuff and say, yeah, I'm adding cinnamon to that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because I mean, we all do that, right? When we're running games, you look at it and you like going, "Oh no." I mean, maybe it's because you don't like to run that thing. Maybe it's because you go like, "Yeah, this is going to stop my game dead, and my guys will never get past it. I'm not going to do this one right."
Or it's like, man, you know, I'm gonna make this one cooler. And
Yeah,
yeah, that's also one of the weird things I've had to do with my channel is explain, because there are people that say, I hate pre-written modules because I want to do my own things. Like, you know, you can change the recipe, right? Like that's like encouraged.
yeah,
Um, or like they'll stick to it very rigidly. Like, why? You know, if you're not absolutely positive your players are going to love it, don't do it.
Right.
If you can do better than what that says, definitely do it. And I'm willing to bet money that if you were to contact who wrote that adventure, they will tell you the exact same thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's just it. Is that I think sometimes that as a GM, it's I've seen folks read through an adventure and go, I love how this sounds. I want it to turn out just like I just read it. And it's like going, well, I don't know that that's really the intent. That's not really the intent of what when someone writes this. And I think all this gets back to the question of what's the difference? Is that, there's a different intent on what you want the reader to take away from it. And I think toolbox is important. Oftentimes, I think games forget the toolbox element that a book, a rule book, is really, it's not about reading something beautiful. It should be beautiful, but it's about saying, when I'm at the table, I can find what I need to make a
Oh,
really cool story with my buddies, right?
well, like with game systems, one of the things I always describe is like with it's a couch raid is like there's certain games, whether adventures or systems, I can sit on the couch and I can read it and be like, hell yeah, this is
Yeah.
great. But then there's in game, which is my buddy says like, hey, how far is it I can jump if I get a running start? Like, okay, and then we spend the next 15 minutes going like, I don't even know where to find this. What the hell? And all of a sudden, all those big purple poetic prose that were really great to read on the couch, like, get this crap out of my way. I'm trying to find the rule because I'm trying to get
Right.
back to my game. So there is that difference of, I want to be able to grab that book in a pinch and just find what I want, put it aside. Let's keep going. And a lot of them, I think, are written with the idea of like, they're going to be standing in the game store. They're going to open it up and be like, oh, this is so great. It's like, that doesn't mean that it's a good rule book.
Right.
You might have written something good, but it's not necessarily a good rule book because you do need to have that efficiency aspect
Right.
to it.
Yeah. All right. So we're running low on time. So I'm going to do two things here. First, is there because someone was asking about this, is there a game that you'd love to write for?
Ooh.
Or-
Oh, so right for yeah, I started one, then I got distracted, but I need to get back to it. I'd actually really like to do an adventure, which I need to run it because I believe in playtesting for Cult Divinity Lost that I'm
Oh,
actually
yeah.
wanting to run my friends through. But then our cult game kind of like got slammed on hold because one of the players had a family emergency, and we're like, it's all of us or none of us. We'll wait till that's done. But Cult Divinity Lost is a system that really won my heart, but is not a really easy game to market because it is like very niche, very,
Yeah. Yeah.
very dark, very adults only, but oh, so good. Um,
I agree. It's one of those games that I've got to play once ages ago. And I'm just like, God, that game, it's special. I don't know how else to explain it. It's cool.
oh yeah, it's probably like I mentioned earlier, like Clive Barker with the Magica is like that was that was my 15th 16th year. I read everything Clive Barker had written up to that point. So when I read Cult and they kind of saw what it was about, I was like, this is absolutely my jam. I'm like, well, is it something we could play with the kids? Oh God, no! Don't even let them
No,
in the room
no.
with that book.
Put the book on the top shelf, man. It's
Well, okay, so they've the new edition. One of the covers, I can't even show the cover of it because there's nipples. So there's like the covered version and the regular version,
yeah,
but it's such a great system
very cool
if
system.
if you're into that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'd like to write something for them. Call of Cthulhu, which is actually my number one game. My first love is that. There's a couple things I'd like to do with that, and there's a couple projects I may or may not be possibly working on sometime. So we'll
Very cool.
we'll I'm not allowed to talk about that.
All right. All right. Well, last thing I want to ask is, folks who watch the show know that at the end, we like to talk about somebody that you think deserves a spotlight, someone who, more people need to know about, more people need to check out. And who's that person? Who's that creator for you?
Right now, the one that I really talk about is Bud from Bud's RPG Review. Um, terribly, terribly nice guy. He's also into all the same stuff I am, so that's how I became aware of him. And
Mhm.
uh, he's run me through some games. He actually just did a Call of Cthulhu adventure that just released called Viral, and I was one of the play testers for it. Terribly nice guy. And he and I started talking, I think, when my channel was significantly smaller. So I've
Mhm.
always kind of pictured him like a little behind me. And then like one day I kind of looked at his channel, I was like, oh, nobody knows about him. He's like been my secret. I need to make sure everybody else knows about him.
Uh-huh.
So he talks a lot about Delta Green, modern day Call of Cthulhu and horror
Mhm.
scenarios. Sometimes goes into much older games. I like him because he does talk about a variety of systems. It has a very interesting perspective with a lot of years behind it. It's just a fun guy. He's quirky. His whole channel gimmick though is like it's his hands
Uh-huh.
talking. So I still give him crap if you're not real. You're just
Just
you,
hands,
you're
disembodied hands.
just a pair of disembodied hands. Uh, or like the Lovecraft's whispers in the dark. It's like you're literally just a monster with some human hands and face, and that's all you are. You're not, you're amigo.
Well, look, we've pushed things right up to the limit here. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, Seth. This has been awesome. I really appreciate it.
No,
Stay on for a second. Once we're done, I'll catch up with you. But thank you so much. It's been great having you on the show.
no, thanks. This is fun.
All right. Thank you. Well, folks, that's it. We are done for tonight. Thank you all for watching. We really appreciate it. Make sure to mark your calendar. We're back next week at 7 p.m. And we'll be talking about more geeky stuff and having another cool creative stepping out of character to talk to us about their art and their craft. So that's it for now. Good night, everybody.